Hi there, I want to go through 4 examples of tablet dose calculations with you, and therefore we'll need to have a first look at the tablet dose formula. Now what you want means what you want to give the patient, whereas what you've got means what have you got in stock. So we could have written this more simply as patient over stock, and this is the formula I'm going to use for these 4 examples. So let's dive right in. Okay, the first question says a doctor requests 30 milligrams of a drug and your stock dose tablet is 10 milligrams. How many tablets do you administer to the patient? Well, here's our formula, patient over stock. So I'm just going to use this formula to unpack the question. I want to give the patient 30 milligrams. And in stock, I've got 10 milligrams. Now this one's pretty straightforward. The first thing about it that's straightforward is that our units are the same top and bottom, so we can proceed with the working out. Now you can probably see the answer already, but let me go through it with you in case in another example it wasn't so straightforward. Knowing that my units are the same, I can look to simplify the fraction, and in this case both values top and bottom end in 0, so I can cancel the zeros, otherwise known as dividing by 10. So the answer equals 3/1. In other words, my answer is 3 tablets. Now that was a pretty straightforward question, but in an examination or on the ward you might want to double check with the calculator. So let's do that. So I'll turn my calculator on. I had 30 divided by 10 equals, sure enough, that confirms that our answer is indeed 3 tablets. Good stuff, let's go on to the next one. Second question. We need to give the patient 0.1 grams of a medication and each tablet is worth 50 milligrams. And again we need to find out how many tablets to administer to the patient. Now this time you'll notice that the units are different between what we're giving to the patient and what we have in stock. But again, we do start with our formula, patient over stock, but we just unpack the question faithfully using the values given. So the patient number is 0.1 grams and the stock value is 50 milligrams. And because those units are different, we cannot proceed unless we have made both units the same, so we'll need to convert one. I'm going to go with the awkward looking one, which is the 0.1 grams, and I'm going to convert that to milligrams. So I do need to remind myself how to do this. Well, I've just shown you the chart that I like to use to think of when converting units of weight, and we can see that to go from grams to milligrams we are multiplying by 1000, or in other words we are moving the decimal point 3 places to the right. There's my 0.1, and I've said I'm going to move my decimal places 3 places to the right. 1, 2, 3. I think you can see there's room there for 2 extra zeros, and hopefully you can see that that's come out to be 100 milligrams. So I can now rewrite that question as 100 milligrams over 50 milligrams. My units are the same, so I can now just simplify that fraction right down. Well, again, you can probably see that what the answer is going to be, but let me just work through it anyway. Both values again happen to end in 0, so again I can divide top and bottom by 10, which is what we mean by cancelling out the zeros, and also 5 goes into top and bottom, so it becomes 2/1. In other words, our answer is just 2 tablets. Again, let's mimic checking this with our calculator. Now, because we had to do a conversion, let's mimic that part first. We said that to go from grams to milligrams we had to times by 1000. So 0.1 times 1000 equals, sure enough, it equals to 100. And then we did 100 divided by 50. And unsurprisingly, we do get agreement. The answer was obviously 2 tablets. Excellent, let's do another one. The doctor requests 0.6 grams of medication. Our tablets now come each worth 150 milligrams, and again we need to find out how many tablets to give to the patient. As before, we unpacked the question using the set formula, patient over stock. So we want to give 0.6 grams, and in stock we have 150 milligrams. Again, we did not have agreement with our units top and bottom, so again I'm going to give some thought to converting. Now here I'm thinking I'm going to convert the top number, because that's the awkward decimal. I'm going to convert 0.6 grams to milligrams. So we have 0.6 grams to milligrams. Well, that's again going downstairs, so again I'm going to move that decimal point 3 places to the right. 1, 2, 3, which is the same as multiplying by 1,000. Again, I've jumped outside the number, and there's 2 empty loops, so I'll put those in now as 2 extra zeros, and I hope you can see that what we've got there is rewriting that question as 600 milligrams over 150 milligrams. Our units are the same, so we can now look to simplify. This one's perhaps not so obvious. 600 over 150, well, both values do end in 0, so I'll just cancel those out. I've divided by 10, and then I notice that 5 goes into both. Well, 5 goes into 60 12 times, and 5 goes into 15 3 times. And finally we can see that 3 goes into both top and bottom. 3 to 12 is 4, 3 to 3 is 1. So our final answer is 4 tablets. In the 2 cases we've done so far where the units are not the same, we've had to ensure we do the conversion first before we tackle the simplification. Let's check all this with the calculator, clear the memory. The first thing we did when we unpacked the question with the formula was to notice that our units were not the same. So I'm going to convert 0.6 grams, 0.6, down to milligrams by timesing by 1,000. And sure enough I get 600. And then, now the units were the same, I simply divided by 150 to give the answer 4. With a calculator this whole process is a lot quicker and we don't have to do anything like the same amount of working out. But our final answer, 4 tablets, comes out nicely. Okay, on to the last question. A doctor requests 1.2 grams of medication. Your stock dose tablet is 200 milligrams. How many tablets do you give to the patient? So there's my formula becoming familiar now. Unpack the question using the formula. I want to give the patient 1.2 grams. In stock I have 200 milligrams. And once again we see that our units are not the same. So, as before, we have to think about converting. I'm going to choose to convert the 1.2 grams to milligrams, and therefore thinking about my conversion, again I happen to be going downstairs, times in by 1,000, move that decimal 3 places to the right. Therefore there's room for 2 zeros. We can now see that formula has become 1,200 milligrams over 200 milligrams. My units now do agree, so now what I can do is simplify that down. Well, 1,200 over 200, both numbers end in 0, so I can divide by 10 once, divide by 10 twice. That leaves 12 over 2. And then I can half top and bottom to give 6 over 1. And you should be able to see that your final answer is 6 tablets. You know you've made a mistake if you end up with a final answer that isn't a whole number, because we almost certainly expect all tablet questions to have whole number answers. Okay, finally checking one more time with the calculator, clear the memory. I did 1.2 times 1,000 to do that first conversion to make sure my units are the same. That came out to be 1,200, and then I divided by 200, and sure enough that gives 6. Now you might have had the thought, does it matter which value we convert? We keep converting those values with a decimal. I could instead have converted this value here, milligrams to grams, which would have been 3 places in the other direction. So what I would have had is, there's my 200 milligrams, move my decimal point. Well, I need to decide where the decimal point is to begin with. There it is on the end, 1, 2, 3, and I hope you can see that that comes out to be 0.200, or just more simply 0.2. So I would have rewritten it as 1.2 grams over 0.2 grams. With a calculator, that's very easy to do. Clear the memory. 1.2 divided by 0.2 does equal to 6. Without a calculator, it would have been a bit tricky to do. We can do it, but it requires something a little subtle. We can't simplify that too readily because they're not got whole numbers, top and bottom. We'd have to multiply top and bottom by 10. I suspect this is a step too far for some of us, but just to complete that thought, that comes out to be 12 over 2, which then finally comes down to 6 over 1. I think you can see the rationale behind me deciding to convert that value which I found most awkward, that value which had the decimal. But either way, it is a straightforward procedure for tablet dose to use the patient over stock, the what you want over what you've got. But with a calculator, it's a lot quicker, but whichever way you do it, you must always ensure before you fully carry out the formula that the units are the same, top and bottom. Thanks for watching.